Welcome to Friday. This means it's MSP Confidential time, and I have a wonderful guest today in Mr. Josh Kotler, operating partner, Axial Reade Capital. Josh, thank you so much for being here today, man. How are you?
I'm good. Happy to be here, and not just to be your guest, but it is Friday, isn't it?
It is
I think this
Friday,
is the last thing I have to do today. This is awesome.
and we're living and breathing. What is there to not be happy about, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that the mindset of gratitude is something that is more pervasive in me as I get older, and I see that more and more of people as they age as well. So I appreciate
I
the call
think
out.
it's the key. It's the key to happiness. The key to
Absolutely.
happiness. So
Well, Josh, it's so great to have you. Our friend Kyle Christensen introduced us when we were at a recent event.
you
There was an
did.
interesting sort of little sidebar conversation happening on the show floor, and I heard some interesting things being talked about. First, I learned about you, of course, your history as an MSP, as an operator inside an MSP, and your move
Yep.
into sort of the private equity space. And I always find that interesting because I've been around larger MSPs before, and I find that the operators typically are the ones that end up doing some of the M&A and some of the acquisition conversations, and they get very, very good, and a lot of acumen is built around the whole acquisition, profitability, operational efficiency, and the mastery that's required and all that stuff. So I wanted to ask you sort of your experience in making that transition from being at an MSP to now being at private equity. But like, what's the one, two, three of
So
that process?
yeah, it's very different. Definitely, after 20 years, we weren't an MSP the whole 20 years, but 20 years in IT services and just sort of dealing with that daily grind of customer issues, new business opportunities, employee issues, sometimes some churn around all those things. When I made the decision to sell. All right, went through a process and I sold at the end of 2019 to Compass MSP. And so I'll start with this. The moment that deal closed, and just to sort of set the stage, if someone had asked me in 2017, 2018, beginning of 2019, hey, is this business stressing you out, or are you stressed? I would have said, no, not at all. I got this. I feel great. No worries, right? The moment that really the wire came through and I saw that the wire hit and I knew the deal was done, I levitated. I started floating. So a lot of stress has come off since that moment. And not only, did I sort of lock in some financial security, but by unburdening myself a little bit with that very stressful, daily pursuit, I was free to learn new stuff, and I could kind of reinvent myself. And that happened, right? So when I went to work for Compass MSP, and to your point earlier, it seems like a lot of the folks that sell, the operators, the MSP owners, the OGs were called, right, in the industry, go on to this sort of, where they get involved in an M&A. And the reason they do it is because the private equity firms or the investors that now own your company see that you have all these relationships, right? And they want more than anything to, do M&A. They want to grow as quickly as possible. And the best conduit, these sellers, people like myself, become the best conduit because we have trusted relationships with other MSP owners. So I did that, but I also learned, I did more than just source deals. I learned how to put a deal together. I learned the math the, you know, behind enterprise value creation. And I just steeped myself in this process. And part of it was because it was during COVID and I had nothing else to do. But it was really intellectually engaging and a new challenge for me. So um, I was with Compass for a little more than 2 years, did 4 deals at Compass. Really, between my deal and the deals we did, we more than tripled the company. And then, I looked around and said, I don't think I want to be on an executive team anymore, and sort of, I want to do something else. So I left Compass and took some time off. And then I started getting these phone calls from private equity firms saying, hey, we need a Sherpa. We want to participate in the MSP space. We we need a guide, and we need some help with strategy. We need your network. We need these things. So I talked to 6 or 7, and I couldn't quite find one that aligned with the strategy that I thought was the most appropriate. Little less lofty goals, right? I kind of wanted to dial it back, reduce execution risk, and come up with a strategy that I knew I could successfully execute in 3 or 4 years. And finally, I was introduced to Axial Reade in New York. We hit it off personally. They signed off on the strategy, and we're off and running. So now I'm a PE guy all of a sudden. I need to get one of those Patagonia vests.
I was just gonna say we
Right?
get you the finance bro vest anytime now.
That's what I need.
Um, so I have questions because you've
Yeah.
literally unloaded a ton of little nuggets there along the way. The first one is, you talked about the burden. I also didn't experience this until after the sale completed. And I find that, and I talk about this with MSP owners often, the ones that are currently, in the in the
Yep.
in the
Sort of figuring
turmoil.
it out. Yep.
And I think there's this certain sort of inertia that's been built over the years that you just get increasingly comfortable with, and you start to desensitize yourself to really the pressure, the cooker that you're kind of in.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is the cybersecurity lid of that pressure cooker has been incredibly additive to the pressure of the whole situation. To continue
Oh my
the
God.
whole
Yeah.
metaphor, because
Yeah, I got
now,
out before that really became a big issue. I probably have a heart attack right now.
yeah, I was going to say I was just about sort of on the threshold of when that was really starting to become a concern. And that was one of the first things I remember thinking about, in terms of feeling the levitation, was like,
Yeah.
yeah, this was starting to become like the thing I lose sleep over. And no doubt there's MSPs out there losing sleep over keeping their clients secure every day. Which brings me to this segue to this concept of the hero complex. I've talked about this with so many people before. I think we're very much, as MSP owners, in our own way of delegating, of sharing the burden, of figuring out ways to efficiently manage, our life work
Right.
integration, so to speak. And I wanted to ask you if you felt some of that hero complex, that only you could be the rescuer for your clients, and some of that.
Yeah. So, I did, particularly when I was a little younger, a little earlier in my career. Some of it is the hero complex or whatever you want to call it. I was a commissioned infantry officer, so I went through a lot of training in the Army, and I ended up blowing my knee out. So no one ever took a shot at me. But the in the Army, they call that the leadership high, and it's not a good thing. We are trained and counseled about being aware of being in a leadership high or experiencing leadership high, and how it can fuel you to run further and faster than your men, and become a problem as a result. So this happens in business as well, right?
Hmm.
We are, the buck does stop with us, right? For so many MSPs, they're the lead engineer, they're driving the business development, they're running the back office, they're dealing with all the client, everything bubbles up to them. And yeah, it's a dangerous thing. For me, I got to a point, probably 2014, 2013, something like that, where I remember looking around in a team leaders meeting, and realizing that there were some really smart people that I was working with, and they didn't need to look at me anymore for a final decision or even an idea about what to do next with a particular problem. And so I started, with the help of some folks at True Methods who did some consulting with me. I started to just throw the questions back to them. Well, what would you do? Right. And we did enough of that. And I realized their answers were every bit as good as mine, if not better, because they were closer to the problem.
Hmm.
And so I was able to get rid of a lot of the day-to-day responsibility. And really, in the end, I guess this is a podcast, so I should be careful about secrets, but they were running the business and making it better. every month, not me. And that takes a lot of the pressure off. So the advice I would give MSP owners that feel like they're in that, maelstrom is trust your people. Trust the people that are closer to the problems. Let them solve it. Their ideas are probably just as good as yours.
Hmm. Yeah. Advice for the ages, man. I feel that that's
Yeah.
ubiquitous across, every vertical, every industry, and so on. You
Yeah.
talked about the learning process and how after the sale you kind of steep yourself in the math of the deals and the deal making. And I was curious to ask you what exposure you had to all of this prior to the sale, because I know that we kind of often hear from the aggregators, from the acquirers, from the people
Right.
out there kind of talking to MSPs, trying to find their pipeline for
Yeah.
deals.
Sure.
And it's a bit of a one track conversation. And we don't often hear from those that sold or how to prepare for that type of
Yeah.
situation. So yeah, walk me through a bit of your experience from the other side of the coin.
So when I sold in 2019, if you sort of think back, there weren't a lot of these sales happening. They were certainly happening. They were picking up speed, but this was relatively early in this sort of M&A craze, that boom that we're in now. If you went to IT Nation or DattoCon or something like that, there probably wasn't a single session on, on selling your MSP offered by anyone, whether it was private equity or someone like me who had already sold. Now, if you go back to those conferences, I guarantee you we're going to see each other this fall. There's going to be 15 sessions in each of those dedicated to that topic.
Hmm.
So MSP owners are more educated than I was. Look, I didn't do a lot of things correctly. I made a lot of mistakes. It worked out for me, but there's a lot of luck involved. I didn't run a real process where I, went out and solicited bids from 10, interested or likely interested buyers, or 20 even. I didn't hire a banker. Um, it just made a bunch of sort of rookie mistakes, but in the end, I was smart enough to bring three offers to the table at the same time, and I negotiated pretty hard. And um, I think ended up with a great option in Compass. Almost didn't have a personal relationship at the end of the tough negotiating, but
Yeah.
fortunately, the Compass chair is a good guy who understands I was just negotiating anyway.
Well, and I suppose
But yeah,
the post deal MO kind of defines a bit of whether you're willing to go out in the flames or not. Because if you're going to end up
yeah,
transitioning, have some kind of earnout, need to stick around and make things work for a year, a couple of years, you kind of don't want to create a toxic environment for yourself in the process of getting the
no,
deal done, right? So,
no. The biggest thing is just to be totally transparent about facts. Don't hide anything. If you found someone that you think you want to transact with, I mean, you shouldn't negotiate exclusively with them, but you should really lean into that relationship. And you're building a foundation that you're going to build 2, 3 more years on, maybe, or maybe longer. So
yeah.
yeah, really important to be totally transparent, um, and you know, and act in good faith. Strong negotiating is fine, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah. I feel like there are maybe schools of thought around the desire to sell. And this is an interesting conversation from time to time because I hear MSP owners often very on a high horse about, oh, I didn't build this to sell it, or I'm not interested in selling. Did you know you wanted to go that route, or did you find yourself kind of surprised by the process sort of landing on your desk? Because I think this is how it happens for a lot of MSPs
Both,
today. Yeah.
both. I'm going to give you one of those answers. Yes. Um, so when it started, at like the beginning of 2019, no, I had no intent to sell. We had just finished probably our fourth or fifth 20% EBITDA year, 15% growth. We were at scale, and I had total confidence in my team, and thus total confidence in achieving the 3-year plan that we had at the time. And then I got an offer, unsolicited offer from actually a friend who had a big MSP in the state and was interested in expanding to South Florida. And my reaction was, look, I'm not selling. That's what I said on the outside. On the inside, I said, oh, it's worth something like that.
Hmm.
Like I could take that and leave. And once those wheels start turning, it's
Yeah.
really hard to
There's
stop
no
them.
stopping the wheels. Yeah.
And no. So I started taking some of those calls that I would reject, in the past and exploring as casually as I could with as little time put forward as I could, some relationships. And so I went from no, I have no plans to sell to within about, I'd say 5 or 6 months, I'm definitely selling and I'm going to try to run a process in a way that's going to get me the
Hmm.
best choice, the best set of choices at the end. Um, and one of the things I realized is 80% of my net worth, 70, 80% of my net worth was in that MSP. And there were security concerns that were starting to become a bigger deal. Uh, I ran a private cloud for that 60% maybe of my clients were tenants in. And I started to realize I'm one mouse click away from, just to use round numbers, 10, $15 million just evaporating.
Yeah.
And, you know, just sort of a quick aside, an MSP that I know had that happen to him about a year later, year after that. And his MSP is still around, but he lost 85% of his business.
Hmm.
It was one mouse click. It was a patch that didn't get deployed to a VMware management console, and that was that. So yeah, that's how that went.
Yeah. I think there's so many nuances to the process. There's good things, there's bad things. Um, I don't think we ever expect the process to be sour or have bad aspects to it. I think we kind of, when you first get approached, you either kind of have this, no, I'm not interested. And when it happened to me, I did that the first couple of times, but then I realized, maybe there's a learning opportunity here. And, 2 years, 3 years after, once my deal was done, looking back, I thought, I'm so glad I was at least curious to learn more about the process,
Yeah,
understand how these folks are
yeah,
thinking. Maybe because we'd get into early conversations and we weren't the right fit. They were just kind of exploring. And
yeah.
but at least I could ask the question, okay, well, what does something interesting look like to you, a year from now, two
You could
years from
start to
now?
build your business that way.
Well,
Yeah,
exactly. You start to sort of framework a bit of where you're going. And for many small MSPs who are often, not necessarily goal setting this type of specific outcome, um, we're just fighting the fires and all the other stuff. But it kind of gives you a nice little framework. And I've seen MSP aggregators or aggressive acquirers out there literally sending out their entire framework. This is kind of what we're looking for, and they put it in a slide
yeah,
deck. So they kind of just even promote their framework altogether like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are thousands of MSPs, maybe more than 10,000 that are going to sell in some form in the next 7, 8 years. And yeah, so I don't actually think there's anything wrong with, as a buyer, telling the market exactly what you want, right? Um,
Yeah.
why screw around? You have to sift through 10,000. You might as well get some to self-select or opt out.
Indeed.
Uh, um, yeah. So
And for those listening in, there's an episode from a little while back with our own Ryan Sigwin, who I'm sure you've actually met him, Josh. He was involved with a
yeah,
lot of the M&A for F12 networks. And he jokes that ScalePad is only his second job ever because he was at an MSP for 20 years before that.
yeah,
But Ryan and I had a conversation specifically around all the things that people don't tell you during the, process of M&A. Like,
sure.
hey, everything is negotiable. Like sometimes we kind of are on the
Yes.
receiving end of an offer and we assume that those are the terms and that's how it's going to be. Turns out there's a lot of flexibility in how those deals get done in the end, isn't there?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then there's a lot of stuff. So something that happened to me, and uh, I can't make this point more forcefully. Don't be afraid to admit that you don't understand something. right? Don't let that hold you back because, I went ahead with the deal without understanding a lot of key components of the deal. I just didn't understand them.
Working
And again,
capital.
it worked out. Yeah, well, I didn't know that one. And as we were approaching the close, you better believe I started to focus some more on it. I was, at that point, I had my lawyer and I had my CPA, but I was, on Reddit boards, Googling different network and capital formulations, trying to negotiate still some of those terms along the way. It ended up being fine. Um, but yeah, don't be afraid to, first of all, make sure you understand. Maybe that's the way to put it, right? Make sure you understand everything. If you have
Mm,
to read a bunch of books, read books. If you have to go talk or join a peer group or talk to some consultants or talk to 10, 15 people like me, go do it. Uh, you know, like don't go into this from a position or don't go through it from a position of ignorance. It is worth your time. This you get to trade this asset once,
yeah. Yeah.
so
One
do
time.
it the right way.
Yeah, I wonder if it's maybe because the first way didn't work that so many go and do it again and start another MSP and go down the. I see this happen more
Yeah,
and more lately too, and I always think that's interesting because given the burden conversation, I can't imagine myself getting into it again. But sometimes I catch myself in those wishful thoughts, and then I have to pinch myself out of the.
sure. So people do it for a couple of reasons. I mean, I with a partner went out and bought an MSP in the Washington D.C. area, and we own that now, and we're operating that business. Small MSP, but starting to get some real traction. Um, but we're not doing it. We're not doing it as day-to-day operators. We're
Mm,
not in the business. We've invested in the business, and we're trying to make the business better from the board level. So a couple of things on that. Number one, doesn't work very well. You actually do have to roll up your sleeves and get in a lot of cases. Um, and number two, don't do that. Just don't do it. It's unless you need to, right? Uh, this is selling your MSP is a gift, right? It's a gift in the sense that you can set yourself up financially, ideally forever, but you also get all this time back. You get to do something else. And, I'm doing something very related, but something different. And that's
mm,
what gives me a lot of energy every day. With Axial Reade, we're building MSPs just like I was building an MSP in 2019. And just like I was building an MSP at Compass, for 2+ years when I was there. I'm just doing it from a different level or a different vantage point, right? Um, but yeah, we're going to build at Axial Reade, we're going to build 3 or 4 really exciting at scale brands, regional brands. Um, and I'm going to have more fun doing that than I have so far with my MSP and with Compass MSP. It's fun to build things. It's a challenge, it's a puzzle. Um, but it's
yeah.
less fun at this point for me to operate an MSP, to be at the controls.
I can see that. Do you enjoy sort of the seed planting component of having obviously been in the industry, being around the MSPs, in many ways having sort of the ability to lower the walls as a ex peer of the people that
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
interested in bringing into the fold, of course. What would you encourage those that haven't even explored this yet in terms of starting a process or starting to learn about this? Simply because like if you're receptive to it, maybe somebody wants to simply reach out on LinkedIn. He's like, I don't think I'm ready to sell my MSP yet, but I'd love to start a
Yeah,
conversation about what
yeah.
that looks like. So,
I probably talk to 3 or 4 MSPs every week. It really has nothing to do with Axel Reed, right? I mean, obviously, if I see a perfect fit, yeah, I'll talk to them about it. But I'll probably talk to 3 or 4 MSPs a week to give them that exact advice. Some of them want advice. Some of them just want to hear what I did. They don't really have, any pointed questions. Um, some are just starting new MSPs and they want to know about how I grew Western DigiTech from 0 to 7 million. Um, but I'm always happy to. I'll help anyone. I come out of the True Methods peer group world. It's a very giving community. I'm sure this is true with all peer groups. Anyone that goes through it, hopefully comes out of it realizing that they're like 9% responsible for their success. The rest is what everyone else contributed. And so you want to give back a little bit, or as much as you can. And so I'm anyone who reaches out on LinkedIn, anyone that wants an hour, you got an hour, probably 2 hours. I have a couple out there who might be watching who probably know who I'm talking about that are starting to take an hour every week. And that's not always fair, but yeah. No,
Well,
it's this industry's given me a lot, given you a lot, right? You know, the
so
one caveat for anyone thinking about reaching out to me is I'm only right about 52% of the time.
that's what Roger Federer says about his tennis career. He didn't have to win all the
Oh,
shots in order to be a world champion, of
that's
course.
true.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah.
So
I'm no
so aside
Roger Federer though.
aside from the comfort and mobility that the Patagonia vest lends itself to,
Yes.
what is private equity actually like? And maybe try if you can to put on your MSP lens on this.
Okay.
I know that I wonder. I haven't really been entrenched on the other side of that equation, of course. So, what is it like? What is it like?
So, so I think most people think that private equity, they're a little intimidated or scared of it, and they don't want their MSP to be owned by private equity, or they don't want to have to report to private equity in some ways. I know I felt that way when I sold my MSP. Compass MSP, uh, it's not private equity owned. It's owned by a couple of family offices, primarily two really smart investors. And that just felt a little warmer to me. It was less intimidating. Um, but private equity was a little intimidating, and I was talking to private equity buyers at the time. But the truth is, this is the truth that I see after sort of being out for 5 years in this world. Good private equity is extremely accretive to all the good things that MSP owners want: growth, profitability, career paths for their employees, better results for customers. Good investors, good private equity, however we want to refer to them, do a couple of things. They drive growth generally through M&A, but also through investment in sales, marketing, branding, all the things that are required to make that go. And they just drive accountability across the organization in a way that most MSPs really don't do at all. The very successful MSPs out there are really good at it. That's why they're successful, right? So if you're intimidated by accountability, maybe don't do it, right? But because it's a real thing, right? Now these private equity firms that are investing are trying to generate returns for their investors through strategy and execution, and it's not as casual a process as it is for many MSP owners. But what I found is that a lot of folks are desperate for that accountability. That's why they join peer groups, right? So it's really no different. At Axial Reade, we run our accountability process through a peer group process. It doesn't even feel like anything other than a peer group. And
Interesting.
I think we get pretty good results.
Yeah, I noticed you make the comment about accountability on the stream yesterday that Alex Farling and Kyle Christensen were doing with Peter Kujawa of
Yeah, that was
Service
great.
Leadership. I thought it was a great conversation, and that comment you made caught my eye because the whole peer group environment, I think, is so critical to the industry. Like we see some of the numbers manifested, and Peter talked about them. But
Yeah.
the thing that really surprised me is that PE-backed MSPs are seeing 3 to 4 points higher EBITDA than non-PE-backed. And I don't think anybody's openly talking about this kind of data, and it's interesting, obviously, that they have that level of benchmarking to show. But accountability obviously must play a big role in that because you're just keeping better tabs on everything that's happening inside the business. But
Luis, I think it goes even beyond 3 or 4%. So when MSPs are aggregated, right? Private equity typically is aggregating these MSPs, creating a new brand or building off of a platform. Think about what's happening. In a lot of cases, the sellers are either coming out of the business or they're less incentivized to uh, really work hard, right? They're a little less incentivized. And you get some churn from customers who say, oh, I don't want to be part of a big brand, or employees that churn for the same reason. So you have all these sort of negative inputs as you're aggregating, and yet they're still achieving 3 or 4% higher EBITDA results. And what Peter didn't say, I don't believe he said this, correct me if I'm wrong, he didn't talk about the growth rates of private equity versus non-private equity, but I'll bet you a box of donuts that the growth rates are much higher as well. So what's going on? How do you start with those negative inputs and create a result that's so much better? And the answer is accountability. It's very easy. I know this as an MSP operator, owner. It is very easy to sort of phone it in for a week or two or three. As owners of MSPs, we're not accountable to anybody, right? We're just not.
well,
That was
wasn't
my
that the whole
problem.
point?
Yes, it was the whole point. But then it becomes the problem, right? That's funny.
Yeah.
I never thought
Yeah.
about it like that. Yeah, that's true. So when I went to True Methods in, I think, the end of 2012, maybe early 2013, that was me. I was a low accountability guy. I thought I was running a good business because I never missed payroll and I always made a little bit of money and I was always growing a little bit. But when a level of accountability was introduced to my life through the peer group process, took off, right? Private equity is introducing that level of accountability and sometimes a little bit more, right? Because let's face it, uh, Gary Pica couldn't fire me, right? Um, that he ran my peer group. He helped my company become what it became. I owe him a lot, but he couldn't fire me. Technically, a private equity firm can fire you if you're not delivering. So yeah, it's more accountability, but that's not a bad thing. This is the thing that the message, I guess. It's not a bad thing. When you get a personal trainer, and I obviously have never had a personal trainer, but maybe you have, um, you want to be pushed. That's the whole point, is to get pushed a little bit, to find yourself out of your comfort zone, to be sore sometimes when you wake up, right? But to go further, farther, to lift more weights. And that's what private equity is doing,
Mm.
um, when they're doing it right. And look, they're private equity. I mean, we understand that the folks that are taking on these leadership roles and being elevated to these positions inside of now a much larger brand, they've never done it before. They need help, right? There's got to be, a lot of patience, and right, good private equity goes out and finds a lot of people like me, and frankly, probably people like you, who can come in and help,
Mm.
right? Help an MSP owner meet this new level of accountability. So yeah,
Um, let's talk about
got me all fired
changing.
up.
Yeah, there's so much there to get into, and one topic I want to bring up is maybe the changing or the evolving nature of the market right now. I think is interesting because it's very fast paced. The change. Do you think peer groups are adapting to this change quickly enough? I mean, is the nature of a peer group enough to sort of have some of your people around you telling you what's how they're dealing with some of the change? Or is the framework of the typical peer group in our space maybe pulling back the evolution speed of that negatively?
You know, I think one of the things I've noticed is there's more peer group membership clearly these peer groups are exploding out of it. The
Sorry,
um,
Josh. You
yeah,
froze there for about 5 seconds. Uh, just about as you
that
started answering the
was
question.
those were my best 5 seconds.
Of course they were.
Uh, I just look. I think that the peer groups are exploding. MSP owners are obviously getting a lot of value uh, from the peer group process. Um, because most MSPs have so far to go in terms of just sort of basic blocking and tackling, I think they're going to continue to deliver a lot of value. Um, most MSPs haven't really figured out a way to handle this M&A wave that's sweeping the industry. Some are. I think MSP peer groups have to evolve just like MSPs, and we'll see how it goes.
I'm reminded a bit about the conversations that we end up having around commoditization, standardization, because as we get desensitized to some of the critical areas that MSPs are working on in their business, I think the tendency is to think that it's no longer as prescient or important or big a deal of a thing that's happening. Would you say M&A is slowing down at all? Was there a bubble now with the recession and maybe slowing of investment, the high rates, et cetera, et cetera? What's your private equity take on that?
No, I mean, look, the high rates should have had an impact, right? That was the first thought. Well, this thing's going to slow down. It may have slowed down for a little bit, just in the early phases of the rate hikes, where in inflation, where I think investors just didn't know where things were going to settle. Um, in the early 80s, you could invest in treasuries and make 14, 15% at one point. So, as an investor, if I thought that that's where the rate environment was going, yeah, I wouldn't invest in MSPs. But that settled down after a few months, and now I would say MSPs or the M&A levels are higher than they've ever been. There are more transactions happening than ever. The valuations for mature at scale MSPs, and there are some of these aggregated MSPs, PE backed, that are now selling themselves, right? We saw the purple guys sell not too long ago. Those valuations are higher than ever.
Hmm.
So the interest rates had almost no effect other than that brief pause because there was so much money on the sidelines, just waiting to get into the industry. At one point, I don't really maintain it anymore like I did, but at one point I had a count of 120 private equity firms that were on the outside trying to get in. So pretty substantial. I'll
Interesting.
bet the number's higher now.
Yeah.
And that was just my count. So that was probably 200.
Hmm. So this quest for, and we call this segment operational mastery, and I was curious to get your take on it, having been on both sides of the equation, because your role at Compass after your sale was actually a
Yeah,
COO, and so
correct.
of course driving operational mastery within the business that acquired yours. But now from the private equity angle, what are the things that MSPs could be thinking about? Being in a better readiness state for operational mastery, because I feel like there's a lot of brick walls that we hit along the way, and this is
Yeah.
what plays out when MSPs get stuck at that $2 million mark and they just can't seem to break through that glass ceiling, and there's another one at 5 million, another one at 10 million, and so on.
Oh,
But
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I was, and you can ask anyone at Compass this. I was a terrible COO. I'm not a detail-driven
I'm,
person.
I'm I'm sorry for the question
Uh,
in that case.
yeah, no, I mean, look, no one put that in a performance review, but I think everyone felt that way. My job was really to put a basic service delivery framework in place, and I think I did some of that, and everyone else chipped in and finished it, which was nice. Um, the so different MSPs at different levels that are thinking about their future differently have to make different decisions, right? About how to,
Hmm.
where to invest their time and where they need to get better. I would say that almost universally, they all need to mature in terms of sales and, organic
Hmm.
growth. Um, I think that when it comes down to the blocking and tackling around service delivery, you can always get better, and it's important to get better. But as a leader of an MSP, I would put that second to growth. Nothing is more important than new logo sales. When they're happening, that's a validation of your service delivery success, right? Because they don't happen if you're doing a terrible job. And it's a validation of your pricing strategy. And frankly, if you're bringing on new business at the right price, you can make a whole bunch of decisions about how you want to deal with your existing business, right? You can move low-paying customers out the back door. You can make investments around automation. You can just invest in a higher level of service at, say, the VCIO level. But without new sales, with new logos coming in, you can't do anything. You're totally reactive. And so job one, focus on organic sales. Figure out how it works for you and get it done, right? Some people can hire an inside sales rep, get appointments set for them. And as long as they get someone setting appointments, they can sort of muddle through it and close a few deals. That's fine. Some people have no business selling at all as owners, but you have a responsibility to make sure sales happen. So go find someone who can, right? That becomes your main priority. So yeah, sales number one. Number two, just make sure that your packaging and your pricing, right? So what you offer the customer and what you charge for it is consistent and makes sense to your market, right? If you're selling to law firms, if you're selling to, school systems, just make sure it all makes sense, right? I think number three, I'd like to see more MSPs recognizing that the value they deliver entitles them to a higher price, which is a long-winded way of saying raise your prices.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm going to get into a pricing question in a second, just making note of it. I think there should be
most MSPs, Louis, should join a good peer group, right? And make sure that they end up in a group with companies that are better than they are, if they can.
Yeah, feels like we need a playbook for the accidental business owner. How to shift your mindset towards a sales mentality, which is often it's missing for so long. It isn't until sort of things get a little more dire that or once that organic.
Yeah, because right, it's an interesting thing when you're a $1 million and $2 million MSP revenue MSP. If you have any type of network, it's fine. You'll be able to grow a little bit and handle any churn. But once you get to around, I don't know, 4 million, 5 million, your ability through your network to replace what you're just naturally going to churn, becomes returns, a very delicate balance there. And if churn gets away from you for a couple of quarters, you're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
So, as you scale, this becomes more and more important.
And the comment I had about pricing is I heard an MSP make this comment. I can't remember exactly where, and I apologize. I'm not giving credit where credit's due, but I thought it was such an insightful way to frame it, right? Because there's a lot of, I think MSPs are challenged with charging what they're worth, of course. But I feel that when they start to think about it, they tend to think they have to over rotate to this place where they make up for all the years of losses or no price increases, which is also tough because I think it puts their integrity in question. They feel like I can't do that. That's not fair And so this MSP framed it as adequate pricing. And I think the industry-specific impact that you're having, many MSPs are niche focused on a vertical, many others are not. But the level of impact you have for any one business has to be priced adequately. And I think this is the thing that we are maybe trapped in the commoditization of like trying to price based on the per seat thing or the per device thing, without realizing the conversation that we need to have at the business outcome level. And so I see more
Right.
MSPs trying to pull away from that type of very predictable pricing model into me like, okay, well, let's understand what the opportunity for impact is here. And then, but that's also difficult to do with clients who expect you to just, provide them a menu of services at a fixed price. And so, what are you seeing in terms of innovation in the pricing model with some of your portfolio companies? Because I feel like this is a super interesting discussion
Yeah.
topic.
So I think that per user core managed services is here to stay. It makes sense for everyone involved in most industries, right? If you're, running a big manufacturing operation with a lot of people out on the manufacturing floor, maybe that doesn't make sense and you have to come up with some new metric. But for most industries, per user pricing works. So I don't think that's going away. And just a quick comment on that. I think,
Hmm.
and one of the reasons that I'm excited about acquiring these MSPs and all these customer relationships is I think that, and this is just not random thinking, I'm seeing it happen in the industry, that the per user price for core managed services will double in the next 3 years. And the reason it'll double is because when the right services are delivered correctly, it's worth at least that much to customers. But one of the sort of frames that I look at pricing through is through the payroll frame. If I'm sitting down with you, Luis, and you're running a 50-person law firm, and I say to you, okay, what is your average payroll cost per employee across your organization? You're going to say, look, it's probably 150, 180,000 a year. Get some legal secretaries, get some partners, call 200 in case we end up doing math, right? Um, so that works out to be $15,000 a month, 18,000 a month. This is where the math becomes a problem for me. And the most critical thing is that their technology be available to them. So when companies are paying 18,000 a month for their average employee, and then trying to get away with paying $200 a month to manage the one thing that dictates success or failure for that employee, their technology, we've got a huge gap here. There's a problem, right? If I'm running that 50-person law firm and I have confidence that the MSP can deliver at a high level, I want to spend 400, 500, 600 per user per month, because the most important thing is that my payroll investment works out. You understand what I'm saying?
Hmm.
And so technology is more and more important. Um, and so we need to charge more and more. And the companies that figure out how to deliver true strategic services and that know how to get involved with line of business applications and make those things work and can function as a strategic partner for their clients, they're going to be able to charge whatever they want. And so now's a great time to buy those customer relationships.
Yeah. I heard an MSP a couple weeks ago when I was in Dublin, and we were having a bit of this deep dive on this pricing because we were kind of on the tangent of the commoditization topic. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the challenge is that MSPs feel the pressure of adding more and more into their stack, into their per user price, and they're not separating, the core piece as you talked about it.
Yeah,
And so it's fine to let some of these things commoditize, but then break out some of the custom things, some of the deeper consulting, some of the compliance into a separate stream. This makes it easier to compete,
absolutely.
because if you come in all guns blazing at $400 a seat, the customer doesn't know the difference. They just expect the computers to be working when they turn them on, and they can get that in theory from the guy that's charging 50, $60 a month off
Right.
Craigslist. So this is, I think,
Sure.
MSPs are
In
in their
theory.
own way Uh, but this is what I think what's interesting. You've been around the Gary Pikas and the Paul Dipples long enough to know that
Absolutely.
also academically we've been beaten to death about simplifying the operational complexity by not having all these pricing schemes and bifurcations in the pricing model because it
Yeah.
makes it more difficult to manage. But clearly that's where we have evolved to and what's needed as a major component of what we deliver is so commoditized today.
So I'm a big fan of um, having a managed services offer, right? And I like a high price. I learned that from Gary, right? Because it's instant differentiation, right? And it helps the customer figure out that in a weird way, the customer wants to spend more. So when you are more expensive, it's uh, it's easier for them to see the value. It's a little weird, but so you have a core managed services offering. But yeah, when I see these MSPs that are throwing all their security and advanced security into this core offering, they're doing some weird things that I don't agree with, right? They're number one, they're making an incorrect assumption that all of their customers need this advanced security stuff that they're throwing into their core offering. That's a mistake. And two, they're generally not pricing within the core bundle correctly, so they're eroding their margin with every bit of value they add. They're actually
Yeah.
creating a margin that's worse and worse. The way we like to do it, and this is how we encourage our portfolio companies to think about it. For MSP, security, advanced security, these are three separate SKUs. We're starting to get into compliance as a service with one of our brands, and so we're learning that business through them. But that's another SKU. I don't mind an invoice that has four managed services, advanced security bundle, managed compliance. It's okay to have line items. Absolutely. I don't like to see all this stuff shoveled into a
Yeah.
single offering. You're just asking your clients to figure out things that are too complex, and they're going to decide that they can't figure you out, and they're going to move to the next person.
Yeah, there's this guy I follow on TikTok, Benzes and Bow Ties. I'm not sure if you've seen him.
Okay.
He's a
No,
sales
but I like it.
manager
I like it already.
at a Mercedes-Benz dealership, and
Okay.
he regularly records his conversations with his sales team. And one of the things that happened the other day, which reminded me of Paul, because Paul Dipple would often talk about, when a car has all these options to build a car differently, the operational complexity increases. He was always advocating for simplifying,
Oh yeah.
one price, all in seat price model, the whole thing. And it got funny because these guys were like, "Oh, this is the first time that this staffer has built a custom order on their own." And as if like picking things from a list was like this incredible skill. And I
Right.
was just having a laugh and thinking, oh, Paul would love this TikTok video right now because he's like operational complexity right there. That's going to be, you know, imagine all the time
I
spent.
learned so much. I learned so much from Paul over the years, and when he said he was going to take a step back, I thought, well, there goes all that. And Peter has really impressed me. I think he is. I'm not going to say better or worse, but he is a very worthy replacement for Paul, and he's continued that great work. I
Yeah.
love having all that data.
Quick, quick,
It's it's
quick ad
it's
slot.
great.
I have Peter coming on
Yeah.
in December. We booked him in
Okay.
for the live stream on December 20th because we had dinner in Dublin and we got into a bit of the conversation of turning around an unprofitable MSP. And I thought that was a
Okay.
fascinating thing
He
to
did
think
that.
about.
So
He did that, right?
yeah.
And so when we were talking, I said, what can we talk about that you wouldn't have to prep for? Because some of these things where the deep dive into some of the decks and the numbers and the research just
Oh
requires
yeah.
a ton of prep. But the things that you've lived through, with blood, sweat, and tears, sometimes are still top of mind,
It just comes right out.
and it
Yeah.
comes right out. So I thought that was interesting to put the lens of the levers that were helpful to get the turnaround happening up at a certain point, and then what was necessary to go to the next level, and so on. Which kind of begs the question, what is with all this shifting evolution? You mentioned compliance as a service. That's something we're talking about so much right now in terms of even a mindset shift. Because I was having a conversation with our own Dan Fox internally about this the other day, MSPs have this heavy dependency on projects through the QBR process, the VCIO process. It's like the whole MO is to try and go and uncover opportunities to do projects. And projects have a mentality of a finite beginning and a finite end. And compliance kind of breaks with that entire model entirely. Compliance is about continuity, continuous programs as opposed to projects. And I think this is a mindset shift that MSPs are kind of unprepared for right now because they have to manage themselves better. They have to do more work. They have to bring the clients into a deeper, more significant amount of involvement. And all these things are kind of playing out slowly, but becoming
Yep.
really apparent how important they are. And so the question is, aside from the compliance specific topic, what are you seeing sort of where is the grass greener? Like where are MSPs moving to find the puck, so to speak?
So I think that I think that we're always looking for new sources of revenue, right? And then there are opportunities to create new levels of EBITDA. So us just starting on the on the revenue side, I see more and more focus being paid to verticalization of your MSP. I see more attention on ancillary services like compliance, CMMC. Uh, I see MSPs getting involved in the insurance, the cyber insurance side of the
Mm.
business. I don't know if I just broke up a little bit there. It looked like I froze on my end.
Not enough to break any of the
Good.
thought process. So yeah, you mentioned verticalizing
No.
ancillary
All right.
services,
Perfect.
insurance. I think yeah, you're right. Insurance has been
Yeah. Even
a big
like
driver.
that. I'm seeing absolutely. And look, I think one, if I were running my MSP again, I would spend a lot of time looking for people that can do real strategic consulting, that can roll up their
Mm.
sleeves, understand a business as a business, and apply technology solutions to the business, identify gaps for the business. Those people are expensive. You're talking about high 100s, $200,000 a year people, but I'd be stocking up on folks like that.
Yeah, this has been a very top of mind conversation because it keeps coming back in each one of these episodes in one way or another. That understanding how money moves inside of your clients' businesses is so key to delivering truly business outcome driven solutions and not just trying to fit them into the mold of something that you priced and packaged for scale necessarily, which
Right,
doesn't always
exactly.
solve their biggest challenges, of course.
Look, this stuff that most MSPs do has a lot of value, but when you start getting into line of business, when you start working on their business, the way their business works, that's where the value takes off.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And what a wonderful note to perhaps end our segment today on, because it's the thing I'd love to everybody to walk away just still thinking about is like, how can I do more of that true consulting? We've been talking about the return to consultative sales over the last couple of years. So this theme is only strengthening, it appears.
Absolutely.
Josh, wow, what
Absolutely.
insights! I'd love to maybe continue checking in with you. I won't take an hour a week from you, but maybe we'll have you on the live
Right.
stream again to see what's changed since the last time we talked. It's always interesting to sort of look
I-
back
I'd,
at, yeah,
I'd love to do it. It might be fun to take maybe even a few of us and you try to manage a conversation. I mean, there's so many smart people in the space. Uh, it's we've really matured as an industry,
yeah.
and there's just a ton of great resources out there. So
Well, Josh, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation. Everybody tuning
yeah,
in
it's great.
today and or watching this later on, thank you so much for watching. We're here every Friday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, live for MSP Confidential. Until next week, thank you again. And Josh, wonderful chatting with you, and thank you for your time.
Luis, thank you. Have a great weekend.